Hi everybody, it's the Professors in Property here with the A to Z of property strategies for you this week. I'm Andrew Roberts and this is
David Clouter, and ladies and gentlemen, we're currently cruising at an altitude of 30,000 feet. To your left you'll see Rio de Janeiro, and to your right you'll see London. Have a great flight. We're going to encounter a little bit of turbulence, so fasten seatbelts.
Well, guys, last week we were in the jungle, and because I've got my pilot's license and David is an able crewman too, we can fly this 747 back to you. So, sit back, rest up, keep your belts on, no smoking, even in the toilets, and dial in for the next episode of Professors in Property Doing Peas. Ooh, my favourite vegetables.
Mine too. I love them in the pot. You just pop them out when they're absolutely raw, and just and I eat the pods as well. But don't do what I do. Do what I say. Now our flight is a little bit empty today. We've only got 4 passengers on this 747, and the reason for that is the first thing that we're going to consider today, which we had no inkling was going to be on this list. This is an extra one that snuck in at the last minute. P, because this is a sort of once in 100-year thing. P is for pandemic. That's the first P. And
everybody's socially spaced behind us, and even David is in a different cockpit to myself.
Indeed so. We've got a separate cockpit on the behind. This is a sort of double-headed 747 that they constructed specially for this episode. We've spoken a lot, and I've gone a lot of stages, and we've had discussions on here as well about property cycles and all that kind of thing. And was it November of 2019? You and I were on a panel talking about the future and 2019, how 2020 would be and what it would look like, and all our projections moving forward and all this kind of thing. And it was a load of old rot, and nothing happened at all. And I don't know about you, but I was completely wrong talking from my posterior. And why was that? Because this little tiny spiky thing floated up my nostrils and things that made me cough. So there we are.
I was going to say, it was a fantastic session, and I'll drop a link in the comments below so you can actually have a look, and I'll get Niall to put on screen here, our video editor, the link to the YouTube video for you of that phenomenal debating session with 5 of the greatest minds in 4 and myself.
No, 4 and myself.
Greatest. So that's really worth watching. Although David says it didn't happen, there's an awful lot in there that is very relevant. So leaving you to carry on with our pandemic.
Look, it'll be relevant for about 2022 or something. Just push forward a bit. But all the things that we said were going to happen will happen, but we just got the timing a bit wrong. So once every 100 years, we get something like this, and the COVID pandemic came out of nowhere. It surprised everybody, and we got a situation where we had the worst fall in GDP ever since records began, more than 20% in a quarter. And this is obviously going to have repercussions that are going to go along beyond the 3 months in which they occur. So what can we look forward to as property investors, Captain Roberts?
Well, we've got a delightful journey ahead of us. On this 747, as we're cruising at 30,000 feet, we can see from our pilot's seat some market turbulence ahead. And this market turbulence will lead to some people getting some bargains and some people losing some money. And particularly, there'll be some phenomenal investment opportunities. The markets are going to change. I love my commercial. And commercial markets, well, we're going to see offices get smaller and be a lot more flexible. We're going to see retail spaces which are just box shifting. I mean, recently we had Debenhams announce administration. We've had other major retailers cutting stores massively because the internet has made some massive changes, and therefore retail spaces need to be reconstructed. We've had lots and lots of support from government in terms of planning changes, and you'll find a whole suite of planning changes in there, and that's another one of our later strategies for this session. But the key thing is repropositioning those properties. Now, perhaps looking at the high street in a different way, as more experiential. Hairdressers, well, even in a COVID outbreak, they closed. Coffee shops, in a COVID outbreak, they closed. Tattoo parlours, they closed. Did anything stay open, David?
I don't think so, no. Only the sort of essential things. The little kind of independently run supermarkets were open where we are because they were serving the essentials. And the off licenses.
That's essential.
So,
just not whilst flying a plane.
You can. It's a disciplinary, isn't it? So we can. We're as steady as they go. Any wobbling from side to side is definitely just the airplane. So yes, as you say, I mean, my view on this is that change had to come eventually, and very often big catastrophic events in history, like the Second World War would be a good example, caused things to happen that otherwise might not have done. And so, for example, in terms of the Second World War, we got penicillin. Penicillin, that little bit of cheese, had been sitting on Alexander Fleming's shelf for 20 years, and it was real shade of green by that time. And the government and Oxford Uni and that other place put a lot of effort into turning this into a product that could be mass produced and into maximising its effectiveness. And we saw that we've seen the benefits in the 70 or whatever it is, 75 years that followed. That was something that was all good. So what happened during the pandemic? Well, a trip to the grocer's wasn't as exciting as I mean, it used to be the highlight of my week, but you know, I didn't have much of an appetite to go there when you're swaddled up in masks and this kind of thing. And before the mask wearing scenario, one of our friends in property was standing in the 2-meter queue for about 20 minutes in the supermarket and then contracted COVID, happily made a good recovery. So, you know, that was kind of off the radar, and I think it's more than doubled. The size of the online delivery market more than doubled, and the supermarkets found themselves unable to fulfill the orders. And so the likes of me were unable to book that regular delivery from any of the supermarkets during the height of the pandemic, because they said, we're just focusing on the vulnerable. There was a huge pent-up demand. So that is just one example of something that's here to stay. And then you've got the opportunists in the business world. There's a guy called Jeff I know of who saw a little gap in the marketplace not being catered for by the supermarkets. And let's face it, your Tesco, whatever, who were pioneers of online retailing in, I think it was 1996 or something, that model hasn't changed. They have a bloke, and all of them do, who goes around the supermarket with a trolley in between the actual supermarket shelves, takes the spam off, sticks it in the trolley with the pineapple and everything, then somebody puts it into plastic bags, it then goes out back where there's a driver revving up the engine waiting to go and everything. This is, if not 20th century, even 19th century technology. The only thing is it's not drawn by horses anymore. This has got to change. Those supermarkets regarded, because of their dominance of market share and position, they regarded their position as unassailable, because it's the basic thing. Food and shelter are the two things we need. But we don't need it delivered in the old-fashioned way anymore. And just as the out-of-town superstores drove all the small, or most of the small independent retailers to the wall and were swept away, I think big out-of-town warehouses, enormous out-of-town warehouses, are the future now, and the stuff is going to arrive at our homes. Because I was talking to our son yesterday, and he was saying, you know, thinking about it, he'd spend, 20 minutes getting ready to go out to the supermarket, and then there's the drive there and the parking and going around the store with the trolley and loading it all in the car, bringing it all home. This is an hour and a half. And now that can be done in a 10-minute window where there's a ring on the doorbell and the guy says, here you go. Moving even further forward than that, Mr. Bezos recently acquired a company who are specialising in self-driving vehicles. I don't think he's going to go head to head with Tesla, so Elon can rest easy. I think he wants to have self-driving delivery vehicles, and he paid a whole lot of money by our standards for this company, and that tech will come along together with his drones. We've already seen the little things driving around. Have you seen the little things driving around Milton Keynes that look a bit like K9 from Doctor Who, with some groceries strapped to their back? You see them, they're going along the walkways, delivering shopping to people. This is just the start. And with so for me, pandemic is unveiling sort of opportunities. So we've got 5G coming along. 5G has no, it didn't cause COVID. That's all just one of those fake news things, complete nonsense. And feel free to put your comments if you disagree, but we'll just delete them. The important thing about 5G is that it's responsive. So it's almost real time. So you can sit in your little office or whatever, which might even be your home office. You can control 20 delivery vans. You can control 20 dust carts. Because these vehicles are going to have the technology now. They're going to be self-propelling. They're going to be intelligent. A little robot will come off the dust cart, up the steps to Granny's house, pick up the bin, down the steps, deliver it in the lorry, take it back. And the big, when I used to work at the BBC, our biggest cost was staff costs. And now you think about it, you look at the 9 o'clock news or whatever, these are all motion control cameras. There's not a single cameraman in the building. And all these computer controlled cameras do all these very clever shots, which before were done by a person. Well, more and more we're going to see sort of automation like that. And this is going to impact our lives in very, very, very sort of real ways. And then as far as property is concerned, again, in the post-pandemic world, I think that, we already see modular construction. We can already, in a very primitive way, we can print houses, which is in cement, concrete, so there's not much difference between those and wimpy finds. But I think the technology over the next 15, 20 years is going to see a fine Elizabethan villa put up on your little bit of orchard behind you there for 15 grand. And so this is going to impact property prices when the only real factor is the cost of the land. So I see a big change in the landscape, and that is what I would have said in November of 2019 had I had the platform and opportunity and foresight.
Well, I totally agree, David. It is a world of change, and just as we're going over, is that Table Mountain that I can just see out the window?
Yes, I think you're right, and the Eiffel Tower on the other side.
Yeah. Wow. Well, it's amazing how small the world becomes up here. But no, I was interested and perplexed because my favourite food next to peas is cheese. Peas and cheese, they rhyme. And I didn't realise that we'd wasted so much of that gorgeous cheese growing penicillin.
Well,
over 75 years. Wow.
There isn't that a thing, and most of it in my fridge.
Absolutely, I've got a good dollop of it as well. So, but no, I mean, the world is going to be a very different world. There's going to be a phenomenal amount of change, and the market crash that we're headed towards in 2020 December or sort of January 2021, the market crash, the housing market crash, is going to give us some real opportunities to repurpose buildings. Houses are going to change. The pandemic is making people who invest in HMOs think very seriously about their model and about how they reconfigure their buildings, because tenants are demanding more en suites because the self-contained environment is what they're looking for after the last pandemic. Serviced accommodation has really struggled through the pandemic, and that strategy is now turning into a staycation strategy, which is great for the 2020 marketplace. So we're having to be innovative, and as entrepreneurs, that is our job, to prop up the economy, to get it going, and to start building, just like Boris has announced, and Bob the Generic Builder has certainly given us the tools to do it through the planning policies. So, David, where does that leave us?
It leaves us in a kind of brave new world, doesn't it? Really, and the people who get swept away are the dinosaurs who are stuck in the past. I went to a big media conference 15 years ago, something like that, and there were all these kind of dinosaurs from the world of television and the old traditional advertising agencies. I remember the 30-second slot in the middle of Corrie. Let's bring it back. And they didn't understand that once you put people in control. I remember a guy called Michael Grade, who was for a while head of BBC One. Very smart fella, son of Lou Grade, who started ITV effectively. And all he did to justify being head of BBC One, within a short time of arrival, he watched what his family were doing. He saw that the kids and everybody were coming and going at slightly different times to his schedule, and he moved to the time of Neighbours. And this shot the ratings, made the ratings absolutely stratospheric, because they were showing the programme at times when people could watch. Well, now with YouTube and all this kind of thing, you expect, and with Netflix and Amazon and other things are available, you expect to come home, push a button and see what you want to see. So on demand has totally shifted everything, and YouTube means that we can only concentrate on things for about 10 seconds, and then we've quit next and everything. I hope you haven't done that with us, because I would be very upset. So people's habits are changing radically. And although it might sound not terribly related to property, the stuff I'm talking about, yes, it is related, because we're not sitting in those big offices anymore. So those buildings are being repurposed. We're sitting at home. So there's more demand. There's more demand in different parts of England for a property like yours there, with a nice view out the window, rather than a multi-storey car park outside like mine in Cambridge. I expect there to be less of a demand for that, or in the city of London, or that kind of thing. So with your retail and everything being home delivered, with cars, for example, I'll make another prediction. In 15 years' time, you see, then we'll be making all our garages into granny annexes. So there are implications for everything, for the property world, for everything I'm saying. In 15 years, if you want to go somewhere, Andrew, you'll have an app on the phone, you'll punch it in, a driverless vehicle will appear outside, not yours, but just a driverless vehicle, which you'll just pay an annual fee to sort of cyber Uber or whatever it's going to be called, and then this will take you effortlessly to where you want to go. The driverless vehicle will then go off to pick up the next passenger, and we won't need cars anymore. So kind of huge shake-ups to every single industry that we know, and these are going to have direct knock-on effects to the kinds of properties that we've got, what we do with them, and the demand, and the whole table is open. And what COVID will effectively do, the end result is very tragic, that a lot of people lost their lives, and that is lamentable and a terrible thing. But the good that will come out of it is that we will start the 21st century, albeit 2 decades later than we should have, but we are going to a different world. And if I don't pop my clogs in the next 10 or 15 years, because I'm very elderly, I look forward immensely to seeing it.
You're not that old, David. You're younger than me.
You're very kind, Andrew. I didn't know you were an octogenarian. There we go. You see, you learn every day. So
it's the wrinkles. Look, can you see the wrinkles? There's loads of them.
I thought that was one of those apps that you can get on the mobile phone that adds kind of red noses and wrinkles. Are you sure?
Yeah, well, it's comic relief up here with me flying this plane, I tell you.
We're having a heck of a time here. We really are. So I don't think it's really time to start another strategy today. This one was only meant to be 5 minutes, but such is the way of things. So
pandemics always go on longer than you think.
They do. They absolutely do. And so, in a sort of pandemic way, I mean, I was pretty nervous when it all started, when we didn't know who the at-risk groups were, we didn't know how you could catch it and all that. There's been a lot of science now, and so I'm kind of blasé about it. Yes, I still disinfect all my shopping, but now I'm a bit lazy. So all the stuff that's in jars and tins and everything goes into one bag. I drop the receipt on top. I stick it in the utility room for 72 hours. I pull the receipt out and check it, and I can just put it on the shelf then, because 72 hours is the time. And yes, all my apples get washed in soapy water before they go in the fridge, and that's it. That's so super simple. Whereas before I was and perhaps I was a bit too hasty to hermetically seal my letterbox. And you're actually coming to visit next week, the David home, for the first time since lockdown. So you'll see this. Yes, and we'll have to take a photo of this. Yes, I did absolutely seal my letterbox with steel bolts that long. And again, perhaps that was a bit over the top, but at the beginning everybody sort of panicked a bit. But now I think so long.
It was a war with an unknown enemy.
Yeah, and now we know, masks on, wash your hands, go about your daily business, and that's a huge. And don't hold me to task on that. So do be careful. Do keep 2 meter distancing and all that sort of stuff. But it's a lot less worrisome than it was. Slim down a bit. I lost a lot of kilos just before this. I went from 92 kilos with a BMI of about 36 to 67 kilos with a BMI of about 23. That probably saved my life, which is a wonderful thing. And so don't overdo the chips. But apart from that, and the really great thing I tell you about COVID is that our 10-year-olds or whatever are, to all intents and purposes, immune. So in the same way that when the Spanish went over to South America and gave everybody, the Aztecs and everything, a common cold which killed them, over time we develop resistance to these things. So by the time today's children are older, vaccine or no vaccine, this disappears. It's no longer a problem. And I'm not queuing up for Putin's vaccine because it makes you talk Russian and Soviet Soyuz and blah, blah, blah. But some people might say he rushed it out a bit. But the Oxford one, for example, I hate.
Well, that's why they're called Russians.
But the solution's in sight. No, we won't have a vaccine this Christmas. Yes, I'm going to spend next Christmas with my family, or we'll all be kind of a bit bleary-eyed with all the shots we've had. And so, it's just a question of being a bit patient. And the opportunities that are going to come from us as investors are legion, as never before in our lifetimes.
And as a good old DJ once said, last Christmas, you gave me your...
We will not...
Well, on that note, as I burst into karaoke, I think we'd better wrap this up, because I can see we've got Beijing Airport just over there, so we're coming in to land.
My lord, right, landing...
Terracotta Army, I think, for next week.
Landing gear down.
Yep, gear down. Everybody, seatbelt sign on. And with that, goodbye from me.
And goodbye from the co-pilot.
All the best, everyone. Bye-bye.